The Rio Grande Valley. Every day, dozens of people risk the journey across the river and over the wall that separates this part of the United States from Mexico. So we're with the Border Patrol on the border of Texas and Mexico. It's about 5:30 in the morning, and they've just captured 10 men who say they're from Mexico who are trying to cross into the United States. The number of people illegally entering the United States from Mexico has actually dropped to an all-time low. But here at the border and across the country, the crackdown on immigrants continues. We've asked them why they come, and they've all said they came for work. This area alone will capture about 5,000 people a month trying to do exactly this. Last year, the U.S. government detained and deported more non-citizens than at any time in history. Every day, over 33,000 people are kept in detention for violating immigration laws. Half of them are held in private, for-profit facilities. It's the fastest growing form of incarceration in the United States. Fault Lines investigates this surge of detaining immigrants and the links between profit and immigration policy.
And that's why I've challenged the Republican nominees and all Republicans to not just be the anti-illegal immigration party. That's not who we are, that's not who we should be. We should be the pro-legal immigration party.
At one of the most exclusive golf clubs in Florida, Republican Senator Marco Rubio is speaking to an influential group of conservative Latinos.
And I think you can find broad bipartisan support today for the idea that our legal immigration system is broken and needs to be modernized.
Rubio is a rising star in the Republican Party.
They're speaking about the real lives of
But it doesn't take long for his speech to be interrupted.
And so it is an important issue, not just for our country, but in our community, it's a gateway issue.
So why do you not support undocumented immigrants? Mr. Rubio?
No, please. No.
Please help us. You are an immigrant yourself. So is everybody else.
We're getting kicked out. We don't believe that Marco Rubio supports the DREAM Act and supports of immigrants.
What's your name?
Got two coming out.
These young activists call themselves Dreamers, part of a nationwide movement campaigning for the DREAM Act, legislation that would give undocumented youth who finish high school a pathway to citizenship.
For somebody to understand what undocumented is, it's basically like saying you're invisible to people. You don't have an identification. There's no such thing as you have an identity. You have to live in the shadows. You have to live in fear every single day.
Are they taking you away?
Jose Salcedo and his friends know that at any moment they could be stopped, placed in detention, and deported to a country they barely know.
It could have happened inside of the rally. I could have gotten detained and I was just pulled over by the cops for interrupting, I guess, such an important meeting. But at the same time, it's a risk that we take every single day when we step outside of our house.
Yes, we have to have laws. They have to be respected. No, we cannot legalize 11 million people.
There's another reason why many Latinos aren't impressed with Marco Rubio. One of his biggest contributors is the private prison company, the GEO Group, which houses more than a quarter of the country's immigration detainees.
It was October, after September 11th. The smoke was still rising, from ground zero in New York. And here is this guy telling stock analysts that, Cornell is a great investment opportunity because
Judy Green has researched private prisons for years. The company she's talking about, Cornell, is now owned by GEO.
And they're going to be rounding up hundreds of thousands of people, and the federal business is going to be the best business for us.
Since 9/11, the revenues have doubled to over $1 billion a year for the country's two largest private prison companies, CCA, or the Corrections Corporation of America, and GEO. The vast majority of people held in federally contracted detention centers are economic migrants from Mexico and Central America.
And we're doing this and claiming somehow it's keeping us safe from foreign terrorism. It makes no sense, but it's making a lot of money for a lot of people.
This looks like a Florida retirement home. But behind the pink walls and palm trees is a detention center. This is the Broward Transitional Center. It's run by GEO, which is actually headquartered near here and is in relationship with ICE. They were anxious to show it to us. It's one of their nicest facilities. Housing 700 men and women, all dressed in prison jumpsuits, Broward is one of 250 detention facilities contracted by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE. We weren't allowed to speak to any of the detainees or the facility staff.
The purpose of immigration detention, as compared to the criminal justice system of prisons and jails, is not to punish people, it's not to rehabilitate people, it's to facilitate the removal from the United States of people when they're ordered removed.
Immigration detention has a dark history. Hundreds of cases of physical and sexual abuse have been documented. From 2003 to 2009, over 100 people died in ICE custody. The Obama administration announced it would reform the system. Among ICE officials, Broward is held up as a model of that reform.
What you'll see in Broward, as compared to certainly a county jail or some of our other more secure detention facilities, is a lot of freedom of movement. You see an interior space where people, when they leave their rooms, and they're housed in rooms rather than cells, are pretty much free to walk anywhere within the perimeter of the building, including outside.
Well, I mean, relatively speaking, it looks great. It's probably the facility where most people would want to be if they have to be in detention, but it's certainly not an alternative to detention, which is what we were being told by officials it was when it first opened.
Cheryl Little has been defending immigrant rights in Florida for 3 decades. Detainees with lawyers, however, are a tiny minority.
And you know, about 84% of immigrants in detention have no attorney, and they have no right to an attorney. And
how can you be in the legal system and not have a right to an attorney? Isn't that a guarantee?
It's a guarantee if you're in criminal court. It's not a guarantee if you're simply facing removal because of an immigration violation.
Cheryl has been inside every detention facility in the state. She says everyone inside is there for a violation of civil, not criminal laws. That locking them up when they pose no threat makes no sense.
We should be releasing people who pose, no risk to communities, who aren't a security risk, who have equities here, rather than rounding up more and more people.
Cheryl arranged for us to meet one of her clients, who was recently released. She lives over an hour's drive from Miami. This is Homestead, Florida. It's a town with a large Mexican population south of Miami. And we're going to meet a woman that was detained at the Broward Transitional Center for 6 months. Alejandra, not her real name, fled Mexico after years of brutal abuse at the hands of her husband. She had hoped to apply for asylum in the United States.
Ya las leyes no hacen nada. Entonces yo me vine huyendo y por lo mismo dejé mis bebés. Por eso.
A few months after arriving, Alejandra was on a bus when she was stopped by immigration officials.
Cuando subió también se miró más o menos quién eran latinos.
They didn't ask for everyone's papers?
No a todos les pidió documentos. Más los que miraban latinos.
She was handcuffed and spent a couple of nights at the local jail before being transferred to Broward.
Todo es difícil ahí. Hay momentos que uno más bien ni quisiera recordar. Jamás que quisiera olvidar, pero uno no lo olvida.
Alejandra is still fighting her asylum case. But after 6 months inside, she's one of the lucky few who managed to get out without being deported.
Yo para hablar con mis hijos para México, para una llamadita, yo me levantaba a las 4:30 de la mañana y entraba a trabajar a la cocina a las 5 de la mañana. Y nada más nos pagaban $1. $1 nos pagaban.
If you had an American company using undocumented labor and paying them $1 a day to offset their costs, what should happen to that company?
So we go after the employers. We try and bring criminal cases wherever the facts allow that.
What if that company is GEO and ICE and the workers are the people in the facility? who are making the food and cleaning the bathrooms for $1 a day.
You're talking about detainees.
Yes.
They're in our custody, and they are allowed to work if they want to. That's totally voluntary.
ICE wouldn't tell us how much money private prison operators might be saving by using detainee labor. Unlike federal and state prisons, working in immigration detention is voluntary. But Alejandra said that wasn't made clear in Broward.
Luego las oficiales nos decían que si no había trabajadoras en la cocina, que si no trabajábamos, que no iba a haber comida, que porque no había quien trabajara, quien atendía a los demás, que no iba a haber comida.
You know, the parallel with the criminal justice system is fairly clear. If you look back at the prison boom, starting in the late 70s into the 80s and the 90s, a huge increase in people behind bars in this country, in part driven by the drug war. You know, fast forward a couple of decades, and here we've got this new population of people who are said to be dangerous, said to be, you know, serious criminals.
Decided that today they will be arrested. I know that I'm being surveilled.
People are not getting the care that they
This is a crime against humanity.
They're running towards the big explosions going on. We're not quite sure what.
To watch more episodes of the Emmy Award-winning series Fault Lines, check your local listings or visit aljazeera.com.
The vilification and targeting of immigrants in the U.S. isn't anything new. But since the mid-90s, there's been a systematic push to connect immigrants with national security and criminality. After the Oklahoma City bombings in 1995, Congress passed laws expanding the grounds for the detention and deportation of non-citizens. In the wake of September 11th, the Patriot Act authorized detaining non-citizens for national security reasons and set up a registry for those from predominantly Muslim countries. In 2003, the Bush administration created ICE under the newly formed Department of Homeland Security. Its 10-year goal was to deport every single deportable non-citizen in the country. 2 years later, the Bush administration expanded the detention and criminal prosecution of undocumented people crossing the border.
The fact of the matter is that the ability of undocumented individuals to enter our country represents an obvious homeland security threat.
In 2006, Congress passed the Secure Fence Act to build a wall along the Mexican border. ICE also promoted programs like Secure Communities and the Criminal Alien Program that flag potentially deportable immigrants in state and local jails. And since Barack Obama came to power, Secure Communities has expanded, leading to a sharp rise in detentions and deportations.
For the highest number of removals in our nation's history.
It has been another record-breaking year at Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
One half of these removals, more than 195,000, were convicted criminal aliens. That is itself another record.
But the bottom line here is that the population that they call criminal includes, in the majority, people who have been charged or convicted of criminal activity that is very, very minor, or things that, you know, the public may not even think of as criminal. Possession of marijuana, disorderly conduct, traffic violations.
For saving their greedy, grimy corporation.
The Boca Raton Resort and Club.
Well, I'll tell you what, I am a small business owner.
Inside, some of the country's most powerful financial institutions are meeting with investors.
Hey! Whoa! Private prisons have got to go! Hey!
Outside, a small group of activists are protesting, calling on banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America to divest from private prison companies like GEO and CCA.
This is a community action in protest of the GAME conference. And the GAME conference is a conference of investors that they spend their money investing in for-profit private prisons.
Private prisons got just one goal.
Gail Tyree organizes communities against prison privatization all across the southern United States.
They're in this business for a profit. What's good for business for them is great recidivism rate, 3 strike-you-out laws, mandatory minimums, harsher drug laws. That's good for business for the private prison company.
We don't want you here no more. Hey!
And basically, my personal feeling is that I feel like they've locked up as many of the African Americans in this community, and now they're going after the immigrants.
In Washington, D.C., private prison lobbyists use the anti-immigrant climate to their advantage. With the number of immigrants in detention up threefold since the mid-90s, it cost over $2 billion a year to lock them up. In their annual reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission, both CCA and GEO emphasize that any changes to immigration policies or laws constitute a business risk. To contain that risk, they've spent at least $25 million on lobbying politicians and federal agencies since 9/11.
Once a market is created where stockholders and company executives see the phenomenon as a moneymaker for them, it takes on a life of its own. They come in with their lobbyists and their political connections, the revolving door, people who work in the prison system or the detention system and then go work for the private sector or vice versa.
That's not something I'm really aware of. It's not something I can comment on. I can tell you this. We have detention facilities based on where the need is. We decide who gets detained. We decide how many people get detained within the overall resources that Congress appropriates.
If anywhere can be called ground zero for for-profit immigration detention, it's Texas. The country's first private prison opened in Houston in 1984 to detain immigrants. Today, the Lone Star State is home to at least 30 privately operated federal facilities. One of them is the South Texas Detention Complex in Pearsall, where nearly 2,000 men are held. This massive ICE facility south of San Antonio is operated by GEO.
There's not much to do here, not much to do at all, just like jail.
Naz, or Mohammed Mustaqim, is a Singaporean national, but he's also a legal permanent resident in the U.S. In 2005, Naz was arrested on charges of drug possession. He was sentenced to 10 years probation. He went through rehab, quit drugs, and got a job working at a homeless shelter. There he met and eventually married his wife, Hope. Their future seemed bright, but that changed abruptly on March 30th, 2011.
And so I went to the door and opened, and there's a full ICE agent with bulletproof vest and gun, and I was like, well, what's going on? You know, he said, are you a citizen? I said, no. Okay, you have to come with us. You know, you have to be detained.
And he said, immigration police are here. And I opened my eyes. So why? Who are they looking for? And he said, me. They said that my plea bargain violated my green card.
I don't know how long the consequences of the action of my past are going to stay with me.
His attorney said, we're trying to keep you out of prison. They didn't say, Nasri, do you understand? You will be deported.
Naz was picked up by ICE because of laws passed in 1996 that dramatically expanded the type of offenses that can trigger deportation. Suddenly, shoplifting and marijuana possession became aggravated felonies.
The law says that the Attorney General shall detain that person while they're pending their removal proceedings. So there's no discretion on the part of the judges to let those people out. They can't get a bond to fight their case, you know, no matter what the amount of bond, they can't get a bond.
Attorney Jody Goodwin has defended dozens of immigrants under mandatory detention in South Texas. Is it unusual for them to use mandatory detention?
No, they use it all the time. All the time. All the time.
Today, nearly 2/3 of those in ICE custody are held without bond.
I don't understand why I'm detained here longer than what I was actually convicted for, you know, because I was on probation. And before, for 4 years, I haven't been a threat to society, and suddenly I'm on mandatory detention.
You know, to them, he is profit. That's why he's been detained. That's why he's not home with me. You know, he could be at home waiting. We could have been waiting this out for 10 months together.
Naz had been checking in with his probation officer every month. He owned a home, paid his taxes, and had just gotten his green card. When we spoke to him, he had been in Pearsall for nearly a year, waiting for a final hearing.
Like even in prison, we get contact visit. You know, in prison you can go and have contact visit, but we only see through glass and about that thick of glass, you know. And sometimes me and Hope she would put her hand on the glass and I would knock, so she can feel me knocking, and then we do the same. Yeah.
Just days after this conversation, we heard some good news. Naz was unexpectedly released and his deportation order was canceled. We heard through ICE that their agents recommended closing his case after hearing his story during our interview.
Protesters are gathering
There's
again.
an air of tension right now.
Chanting for democracy.
This is another significant development.
We have an exclusive story tonight, and we go live.
We have strengthened border security beyond what many believed was possible. They wanted more agents at the border. Well, we now have more boots on the ground on the southwest border than at any time in our history.
In an election year, the need to ramp up border enforcement has become a mantra among Republicans and Democrats alike. Back in the Rio Grande Valley, the men who were captured by Border Patrol had been taken to a processing center. If they don't have the right papers, they'll be deported. But first, they'll be criminally prosecuted for entering the country illegally.
Every single person that gets caught is going to be prosecuted, no matter what, no ifs, ands, or buts. Instead of just picking them up, processing them, and sending them back to their home country. Now we prosecute them, house them in jail for a while, and then send them back to their home country.
Here at the border, individual stories or due process don't count for much. It's largely irrelevant whether these men grew up in the United States or traveled for weeks to escape poverty or persecution. Within hours, they'll all be labeled convicted criminals.
The numbers, the huge numbers of prosecution are just skyrocketing.
What's driving that?
Money. Money.
They become a number. For law enforcement, a success story. And for the prison industry, a profit. Ahead of the election, President Obama promised a transformation of immigration policy. And the Department of Homeland Security has begun to accept applications from young, undocumented immigrants seeking to avoid deportation. But for most, it's not enough.
We believed that things were going to get better. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened.
Obama administration has led the deportation of more people than any of the other administrations in a single fiscal year.
I want everybody to be able to reach that American dream, and that's why immigration reform is an economic imperative.
These are people who just wanted a shot at the American dream, you know, and who love this country. And frankly, you know, many of these folks have contributed so greatly to our communities.
And sometimes when I talk to immigration advocates, you know, they wish I could just bypass Congress and change the law myself. But that's not how democracy works.
But for those on the front lines of immigration enforcement, his words ring hollow.
Until, you know, everyone decides to speak with one solid voice and develop that needed lobby, things aren't going to change, because on the other side, you have companies that are spending billions of dollars in lobbying to keep the laws the way they are.
Until our government does something to make our immigration laws more humane and more fair, then the kind of people that we represent every day, and or that we hear about, you know, in immigrant communities, are going to continue to suffer.
And that's a sad state of affairs when you put a dollar sign on humanity.